If you're someone who's passionate about transforming education, which you are if you're listening to this podcast, you should check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The Charles Koch Foundation supports social entrepreneurs and organizations that are embracing innovation to build better solutions for today's learners. Visit ckf.org to learn more. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio here with you again and again and again as we approach now, believe it or not, approaching very quickly our 400th episode of the EdUp Experience podcast. I don't know how we got here this quickly. I keep telling Elvin, I'm like, we're booked out till August of 2022 on the number of episodes that we have. We're just growing so rapidly. And you know, audience, you've been listening. We're also writing a book called Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, that we are going to take insights from the 100 plus, now it's like 140, but the 100 plus university and college presidents that we've interviewed. And we're going to take all those themes, ideas, innovations, thoughts, concerns, problems, and put them together in a book. Because could you possibly listen to 400 episodes of the EdUp Experience? Maybe, I have, but maybe you want to start at the beginning. So we're going to put them in a book. So if you want to read, you could do that. And remember, you could go to our website. I always say this. All of our episodes are categorized. You could listen to community college presidents if you want. You could listen to ed tech entrepreneurs if you want. You go right on the website and you can find what you need, because we want to give you what you want. And I'm going to give you what you want today. I promise you. Because I've got a guest that I've been waiting for. I've been waiting for him for a number of reasons. First of all, he leads a huge institution, one that you'll know. Second of all, they're an institution that has done some very innovative work lately, especially on the, let's call it the skills to work pipeline and the skills to college pipeline with some of the acquisition work they've been doing out there. And I'm going to bring him in right now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado. Here he comes. He's running to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is Dr. Rick Newman. He's the 15th president at the well-known and amazing Wichita State University. Rick, what's happening?
Hey, how are you doing? Can I call you Joe?
You can call me Joe. Well, of course you can call me Joe.
I'm doing well. We've got some really great things going on here at Wichita State. Always something different, but really making a difference in our community and our state.
Yeah, you know, Rick, a couple of things. I mean, you think about the economic impact of Wichita State University. That's one of the most lesser known facts about colleges and universities in general is the impact on community they have from a $1 billion or multi-$100 million standpoint. Can you talk about what that economic impact is in the state of Kansas and the city of Wichita, and how that ecosystem works?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. Actually, we just finished our economic impact study at the university, the first one we've done in a number of years, and it's well over $1 billion to our community. But that also translates to more jobs in our community, more experiences for our students to connect with our community. And, you know, we're an urban public research university. So there's two purposes of an urban public research university. First and foremost is to make sure we provide educational access to anyone in this community, whether they're a degree-bound student, non-degree-bound student, a non-credit, whatever it is, badges, certificates, those sorts of things. We're very much interested in providing that to anybody who seeks out Wichita State for a higher education opportunity. So that's the number one thing. And the second one is helping our community solve problems through research, through creative activities, and other service initiatives. We've always been in that place. We were founded back in 1895 as a congregationally founded college, more of a liberal arts focus, but still very focused around the community needs. And then we transitioned to a municipal university in 1926 and then entered the state system in 1964. And we're the only institution in our state that's actually growing. It's because of our focus on the community, making sure that we're providing affordable access and really helping move our community forward.
Wow. I love that. So talk about growth. You said it. One of the only institution in the state that's growing. Why do you think that is? Maybe the better question is, why aren't other institutions growing? And what is Wichita State doing better?
Well, about 7 years ago, we really pivoted. For many, many years, the institution was growing maybe 1 or 2% a year in terms of enrollment. There wasn't anything special about what we were doing, but we always had this community connection, and we realized that we needed to amplify that. And so we developed a new strategic plan, a new campus plan, and developed requirements around applied learning for all of our students, paid applied learning experiences with our local business industry folks to get them connected, and not waiting until they're a junior or senior, but the moment they show up here on campus. I'm going to make it very explicit. When you learn about Wichita State, that you're going to be able to see the full life cycle of what it takes or what it is to be a student here. And that the secret sauce in that is hands-on experiences with our employers here in Wichita to help feed their pipeline. So we have many students as freshmen start out working with local business and industry and continuing on throughout their 4 years here and take jobs there. That helps them. That's training that they have to do once they graduate. We've really, in some cases, taken that down from a year to 2 years, where employers have to spend extra time educating recent graduates, to down to less than 6 months. In some cases, none. So that's really one of our big focuses. Now we have over 5,000 students in our student population that are earning over $26 million a year, that grows into their pocket, helps them help pay for their education. We have many low-income, underserved students in our community. And so that's really one of the reasons why we've had a lot of success, and people are starting to see that in not only our programming, but our physical expansion of our campus.
Now, Rick, you've only been at Wichita State for just a little while, right? You just like a couple of years or so, you're new, right?
Well, I think you might be being facetious. I've been at the
That's impossible. That's impossible. I'm never facetious. Go ahead.
I've been at the university over 26 years. I came here as a faculty member, and one thing led to another, and I became the president this past year after serving interim a couple of times. I've really seen the institution change from all those different vantage points, and we've done a 180 at the institution, definitely.
One of the most fascinating parts of that is your length of time, and the roles that you've had they don't add up. In other words, the length of time obviously does, because that's simple math, but provost, academic vice president for academic affairs, and then into strategic enrollment management. And it's like, wait a minute, not many people do that jump. And then provost, back to provost, then to president. So it's kind of a disjointed path, which is becoming more common at the leadership level, I think, is that breadth of experience, especially now when we look at financial models and we look at the necessity of enrollment management. It's becoming a more common that less linear pathway is becoming more common. But what's most interesting about your path, and what I have a question about, is the how you stay so aware of what's happening around you when you're seeing only one institution from the inside. How do you continually innovate, because you've been there for so long? How do you keep fresh eyes and say, hey guys, this is not working, or hey, this is working, let's double down on that? How do you stay fresh, and what do you do to keep your perspective broad?
Well, I'll just say I'm unusual in a number of ways, but one of the
just stop it. Yeah,
yeah,
I love it.
One of the real unusual aspects of me, I think, is that where I started my career in healthcare. And I'm a physician assistant. That's where I started. That's the only thing I ever wanted to do, is to take care of patients and provide that clinical care for individuals. That has really shaped me, and also my public health background has really shaped me in terms of taking risk, understanding the broad system approach to not only healthcare, but also higher education. I mean, there's a lot of overlap there. There's a lot of similarities. just the fact that I came from a profession that was probably the most disruptive profession to healthcare, has lended itself well in terms of me understanding the risk taking and change and being comfortable with that. I bring in lots of people to my realm of activities from the outside. We have a great team. I make sure that we have really good people at the senior level who come from various different backgrounds to help move us forward. I don't know. People ask me that, Joe, a lot, and I can't give a good answer, but things have just happened over time and almost in an accidental way.
That's how we. That is a good explanation of how the EdUp experience came to be in an accidental way, kind of. And then you take something that you're given in the hand that you're dealt, and you make something out of it, right? I think that's really interesting because so many colleges have been in that space now. Coronavirus is an issue that we've all talked about, beat it like a dead horse. We don't tend to go there anymore, but and talk about what the impacts have been, because I think that's clear. But let's talk about a little bit about what the consequence looks like. Where does Wichita State go from here? How have you evolved internally, given the nature of coronavirus and the catalyst that it has been in some respects when it comes to business processes? Of course, there's health consequences that we don't need to go into. I think we all understand that. But what have you done to innovate during a time that's put pressure on the higher ed business?
Well, I have to say that even before the pandemic, we were already innovating in lots of different ways, and it hasn't been easy. Your background in higher education, how difficult it is to transition a university to meet the needs of higher education that we're in, the current situations that we're in. But I'll just say that keeping the message simple and consistent is key. We have three priorities here at this institution. One is making sure that we provide affordable, accessible education. The second one is feed the talent pipeline, meet businesses' needs. And the third is to increase economic prosperity of our community. I don't think it's a big secret to anybody that knows about the Midwest and the Kansas. There's not lots of people flocking to live in Wichita. We don't have mountains and beaches. We have a great community. We have great Flint Hills in the mid portion of our state, beautiful state, but people don't think in that way in terms of Kansas. So we need to think about how we bring people here and keep them here. And so what I've been talking about, applied learning and all of those other things that I've mentioned, is meant to attract people here to think about Wichita and our model of education, keep them here so they'll get connected to industry and business and stay here and help grow our community. That's the message. And I'm consistently using that message to make sure people understand that fully, and everything that we do fits around those three things.
I love it. And so once upon a time, I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, I worked for a career college in the for-profit sector called Heritage College. We had a campus in Wichita. We had like 800, 900 students at that campus. And we used to compete with another school called WATC for the career college student, for the student looking for vocational skills, looking to get a job, get out there. And that was during what would have been the golden years of the for-profit sector, where there were a lot of for-profit colleges. They were, and we were going after a student who maybe wasn't necessarily right for the four-year degree. We were doing it in a highly competitive way, a competitive way that education hasn't seen until now. Now it's being seen at the nonprofit and public university level, where there's a battle for students in a way. But there was always a wonderment for us, like, did those students just end that vocational training and stop and go to work and never went to school again? Wichita State did something really smart and went after and integrated or acquired, in whatever way you want to talk about it, the Wichita Area Technical College, which was training people in vocational careers. And you've created a skills to college in a skills to work pipeline for your university in a way that is just so smart, because why should other colleges go out and pick up those training and certificate programs when you could do that and you could create that pipeline and create more broad industry impact and economic impact for your state? Can you talk about that process, why you did that, and what the intended consequences were and how it's going?
Yeah, so I'm glad you picked up on that. I'm glad to know you have that connection to Wichita.
Yeah, there's even more. I even went to Cinnamon's Deli once upon a time. I don't know if you've ever been to Cinnamon's Deli. It's the greatest soup bowls, bread bowl soups you could ever have.
Yeah, that's where you can pack on a few extra calories for sure.
Yikes!
So anyway, so this is the other reason why we're growing, is that we've made that connection and affiliation with the Wichita Area Technical College, which we call WSU Tech now. It's the GED to the PhD, sort of.
Ooh, you just titled my episode for me, Rick. Thank you.
Yeah, don't you have a little sound thing that you could fit for that?
Oh, yes.
100%.
Exactly.
Anyway, that's how the leadership talks about it, certainly at WSU Tech, and it's been something that's been very positive for us to think about. I have to tell you a little story about it. I was intimately involved in the change of making that change. I wrote the change application for the Higher Learning Commission and worked really closely with the WATC folks to make that happen. And this is prior to me becoming provost. And so we did all kinds of focus groups, meeting with students, and I was talking to a student one day who was a WATC student. And that's student, I was just talking about, what we envisioned, what we thought would happen, and why we were doing this. And she said, this is really great. And then she just stopped mid-sentence and she goes, does this mean now that I'm going to be a Wichita State University student? I said, yeah, that's totally light bulbs clicked on, understood that she could go beyond where she was. And a lot of students, at least in the previous model at WATC, not now, didn't really have that connection to a four-year university. And so now it's our fastest growth of transfer students into the four-year aspect. We have all kinds of learn and earn programs that we've recently started to allow students to get credit for their technical work through to a four-year degree. That's been a challenge because you know how general education and all those kind of things play a role in that. But it really has been something that's been very, very, very rewarding for those students, but also for our university community.
Smart. One of the things that talk about support a little bit, because when you're talking about a student who goes into a GED, who maybe they weren't successful in high school, many colleges look at that student as a higher risk student. That's why for-profits were able to come in and create margin share for themselves by going after a student they made a bit successful for a university. So this student comes in, maybe they weren't successful in high school, maybe they're a higher risk student. They could be first gen, they could be a lower income, they could be from a lower economic background, sort of socioeconomic, whatever. And there is just a different level of support services that have to exist to take care of that student than a student who comes out of high school. They got, the straight A's everywhere. They're getting a half academic scholarship. Maybe they're an athlete coming into Wichita State, so on and so forth. So there's disparate systems, or at least you have to look at different student types differently because they need different levels of support. What did you have to do from a support standpoint to ensure you had the infrastructure ready to nurture maybe a more at-risk student coming through that GED to PhD pipeline?
Yeah, I just want to say that, again, this gets back to the purpose of an urban public research university, and is to make sure that you provide opportunities for people who wouldn't normally come to school. 1 in 4 of our freshman class is an unrepresented minority. 1 in 5 students who are Pell eligible students enrolled in the 6 state schools here in Kansas are enrolled here at Wichita State. Nearly half of our undergraduate students are first gen, and we're on track of becoming a Hispanic serving institution by the end of this decade, probably sooner when we get our act together to help provide even more support for that particular demographic. So we've embraced that early on, and this really started back in my time as being over enrollment at the university. We've reallocated resources that we get from the state into need-based aid, into other wraparound services for students who need that extra assistance. And then that's also the model at any technical school. That's kind of where their bread and butter is.
That's right.
So it's worked really well. Now we have a long way to go, Joe. I mean, this is not, as you know, this is difficult work, but we've made a lot of progress. We're bringing new people to higher education that haven't had the opportunity because of this relationship, but also because of our investment around need for these particular students. You know, I come back, I keep saying this, that this is what urban public research universities do. And if you look at all the large urban public research universities around the country, they're the ones that are educating the people that I just spoke about. Right. You know, we don't have the resources like the flagships and the land grants. We have to figure out other ways of making this work for students and making sense for our communities. So we've really embraced that as an institution.
Too many learners are being left behind by the current one-size-fits-all model of education. We here at EdUp and our friends at the Charles Koch Foundation see a better path forward. The Charles Koch Foundation supports innovators in education who are building and scaling new pathways to allow all learners to discover their potential. By changing the way we think about education, we can unlock opportunities for millions more Americans. To learn more about the Charles Koch Foundation support of individualized education, visit ckf.org. You're talking about something that is just for me, I think one of the most important questions we have to answer as administrators of our time. And it's funny because I got a piece of email recently from someone that asked me why I keep asking this question to all the college presidents. Like, you guys keep asking the same question to all these guys and all these ladies, and you keep getting somewhat of the same answer. And I went, that's exactly why I ask it, because it's these people that set the tone, right? It's these presidents, it's administrators that set the tone. And that question is around the value of a college degree. And the public perception or the public noise, I'm going to call it noise, you don't need to go to college. You can go get a coding certification. You're going to make 6 figures a year for the rest of your life. You can, maybe you need to take an alternative path. Maybe you can do something else. And, don't go to college. It's not worth it. There's no ROI. And there's just a large contingent of folks out there that are saying that. You take Google and you take Amazon and you take other big companies that are putting in their own training infrastructures, own certifications, and so on. And there's just this question of value. And the reason why I think it's so important to ask every single person this question is because it's being challenged. It's being challenged by the public. It's being challenged sometimes internally by faculty, by staff, and it's a question we have to answer collectively to keep college for students, and I mean traditional students and adult students, to have meaning. What do you think, Rick? Where do you stand on that argument? What's Wichita State say about the value of a college degree?
Well, in this whole relationship with WSU Tech, we've had many conversations here as a community and as a state, and we know moving forward, the jobs that are going to be available for people in the future or now are going to require something beyond high school. In our own county, there are 83,000 individuals, and we're about 525,000 individuals in Sedgwick County. We actually grew about 5% in the last census. Most of that growth is through people of color, low-income individuals. But we know that there's 83,000 people between the ages of 25 and 35 that do not have anything beyond high school. So we know that the jobs that are coming out or that are available for students as they come out, the ones that are going to be created in the future will require something else beyond high school diploma. I think if you would have surveyed folks in our community 10 years ago, there would be less value attributed to higher education. But the fact that we've made this connection intently with how we educate our students and how we deploy them in the workforce and really connect to what employers need to move in the future, I think you would see in our community. In my podcast, I was telling you I have a podcast too. I just interviewed James Chung.
I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to totally give you all the chances to plug it. So now plug away at that sucker.
So James Chung, he came and benchmarked us as a city and community 10 or so years ago. And we actually talked about this in the podcast last month. He said that if we would do the same survey now about this, that we would find a lot more people believe that there's a lot more value to higher education because they've seen how we have figured out how to work with our community. You know, there's communities out there that have really succeeded. You know, if you go back to Austin in the early days, pretty small city. When I lived in Houston and grew up down there, you know, Austin was pretty small, relatively small. Now it's huge. Really, a lot of that growth has been driven on the connection to University of Texas. If you look at cities like Des Moines and Omaha, all these communities have figured out how to work with their university, their flagship university, and have kind of translated this kind of lack of value proposition that people have to one of value. And it's because we come to the table and say, how can we help you find a solution to your problem, as opposed to the old model in higher education, which is, I have this really cool idea as a professor. Can you fund me and I can work on that? With this, I'm not going to really help you, at least now, but maybe one day. We've got to flip that, and that's one of our successes that we have here in Wichita.
Rick, I've made a big mistake. In fact, I think we have to record this entire episode, and it's because I when I introduced you, I do these things in advance and then I make mistakes, because I should have said when I introduced you, Dr. Rick Newman. Like that would have been more appropriate for the Wichita State Shockers. I have an actual button that says electric shock, and I felt like, what a mistake. I should have used that. So now I have to use it on the outro.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I like to throw my guests a little bit of a curveball question to learn more about you. And I want you to be really careful how you answer this, because it's possible that it can come back to haunt you if you give an answer that well, let me ask the question. Are you ready? That's kind of a curveball. You ready?
Okay.
I like to do that because it makes me feel like I'm like game show music, but there's no money involved here. No money. We have no money at the EdUp experience. I like to know about entrance music, Rick. I want to know what your entrance music is. What's the song that would introduce you? If you could pick one song, any song, your song, to introduce you at a commencement, in your living room when you come home and you want to have a glass of wine and you're going to walk in and your family, what's that song that represents you, Rick?
Well, I could choose several songs, and you're probably not going to find this interesting, but I was inaugurated this past fall, and I've always liked the song "Feeling Good." You know, Michael Bublé sings that, but also I'm blanking on the African American woman who originally put that song out there. Actually, I think it was actually part of a Broadway show at one point. Anyway, it just describes me in thinking about my sort of my mood, and that this is kind of a new day at Wichita.
Oh yeah.
So and so we actually had one of our former jazz ensemble students come back to Wichita and sing that song, and it was the governor of Kansas was sitting next to me during my inauguration, and she leaned over while he was singing that song, and she goes, "Oh wow, I feel like I'm in a cocktail lounge." It's fun.
Cheers.
Oh, I love it. That's great. That's good. It's funny because I ask that question always to people, and they give obviously some curveball answers, but they always seem to relate it back to the work they do in higher education, because we have passion for this as educators, this hard work that we do to serve as students. This is, and the job of a college and university president, as you've known and discovering more than ever, Rick, is harder than it's ever been before, because of health, because of coronavirus, because of mental health. And it specifically at public research universities and a lot of community colleges where they're serving a lot of first gen or students from lower economic backgrounds and students of color. Their mental health issues are just have been off the charts. Can you talk about that at Wichita State? How do you have like a tiger team? Do you have people that you've put together to really work on offering services to students that universities never really had to think about or offer before, or if they did, it was maybe I don't want to say an afterthought, but not as important as it is now when students are experiencing like real problems like hunger and access to internet all of a sudden became more important than it's ever been. And just talk about that a little bit from the student perspective.
Yeah, we have actually been working on this for a long time. We have several different aspects of this. We have a care team that's made up of a representation from all aspects across campus around the social service needs, the mental health needs, academic needs that reach out to students in a proactive way. We have put additional resources into our counseling and preventive services. About 3 years ago, we expanded our campus. If you were here, remember there was a golf course on the east side of our campus, and now that's what we call the Innovation Campus, and which is kind of the anchor of our applied learning connection with business and industry. I have almost 50 businesses now located on that part of the campus. Some of them have their full headquarters there, some of them have offices there. But one of the things that we knew we needed to do, and this also got tied back to my enrollment management days, in our enrollment management plan, we knew that we needed to focus on wellness. And so we created a student wellness center in partnership with the YMCA. And now we have a YMCA on campus that's adjacent and associated with, in the same facility actually, with our counseling and preventive services and our student health center. And to have a kind of a 360 view of student wellness. That's been very helpful. Again, we have a lot of room for growth. It's difficult. Students come to the university with all kinds of challenges that they didn't have before. A lot of it's financial related, but also unmet mental health needs all along the way that we're having to deal with as an institution. So all of this has been helpful. And again, a lot of work to be done, but we're moving in the right direction, I think.
So, by the way, and we didn't, I don't think you said the name, but the name of your podcast is called Forward Together.
Yeah.
With President Rick Newman, Wichita State University. I think it's monthly, right? You're putting out monthly episodes with some of your alumni and people in the community that have done great things. I encourage everybody to go check it out. They can get it on Apple. On Apple and wherever they download their podcasts, Rick?
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'd like to end the episode with the same two questions of every guest. But before I get to those two, I want to ask one more. So there's kind of just in terms of time, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I think it's really important that we address the whole pipeline of certificate education that's taking place. We kind of talked about the value of higher ed, but there are folks that are wanting to stack and micro credentials, and the pipeline is it's not a linear pipeline as much as it used to be anymore. It could be in, it can be out. How do you think through that in and out phenomenon that's being created, and how do you prepare for that?
Well, I'll say a couple of things about that. You know how we're measured traditionally in retention rates and 6-year graduation rates. Well, urban public schools don't ever measure up really well with that because they're just looking at freshmen, the typical kind of freshmen. We know from looking at our data that when a student starts here, more than 90% of them will eventually graduate. It might take them longer. They're in and out because they have personal responsibilities at home, and they're married, have families, and so forth. And so the whole notion of having different kinds of options like badges, certificates, stackable badges to certificates and certificates to degrees is something that we've been actually working on for a number of years. And we have every fall over 1,000 people from various walks of life students, but also mostly people from outside who are in careers who are enrolled in our batch program that allows them to get small chunks, atomized parts of a course that they can get in a real manageable, meaningful way that fits their needs. And so we're continuing to explore how we can do more of that. And we have business and industry here in Wichita that are wanting this and demanding this. And so even degrees in business analytics and supply chain, we've figured out ways to atomize that education to meet those individuals' needs. So I think it's essential. You mentioned earlier about Apple and Google and Microsoft developing those kinds of things. I think that's great because it forces us to also think about how we need to do that. And I'm not afraid of that because we can actually do this and actually partner with them as well on these kinds of programs.
It's a great point, too, about the numbers, because the numbers can be deceiving in so many ways. Higher ed's got these complex numbers. You can't make sense of them half the time, and you just wonder if somebody's going to come and go, yeah, we're going to start measuring time to credential. Yeah, maybe you didn't finish that degree, but you got a credential where you could go to work, and you can come back, and let's measure the return rate to degree. And there's just so many other ways to measure it that have meaning that, I mean, just the way it's measured is confusing, because nobody outside of higher ed could come in and go, oh, I understand this data. It's always, what does this mean? And how do I interpret this? There's just the smoke and mirrors around higher ed is thick, so to say. I don't have a button for thick smoke and mirrors, but I'm going to find one. Rick, the last two questions for you. Number one, what did I not ask you about Wichita State University that you'd like to say? Anything coming up, anything going on, new programs, new podcast guests you have coming on, amazing people that you work with, anything that you want to shout out or plug. Call this the plug section, plug away. And then two, and most importantly, what does the future of higher education look like?
Well, I'll just say I'm getting ready to walk over to record my next podcast and be interviewing our basketball coach, Isaac Brown, who's the first Black D1 coach in the state.
Nice.
Taken over our program during a very tumultuous time, and he's doing a great job. And one of the things about Isaac, and I'm going to talk to him about this, when he interviewed with me, and before I offered him the job, I said, what's important to you as a coach, a basketball coach? And he said, the most important thing, I want to win games. We need to compete at the highest level. But when the ball stops bouncing, players need to have something to fall back on, and they need to have their degree. And he's been really instrumental in making sure that happens, because there's a lot of distractions, as you know, in sports for athletes. And of course, that was music to my ears as the president. That was one of his focuses. That's one of the reasons why I'm interviewing him today for the podcast, to talk more about that and his thoughts on it and how he has nurtured students along the way. Future of higher education, I have a lot of conversations with supporters, alums, donors who are really concerned about the issue around freedom of expression, First Amendment, and all these kind of things, the value of higher education. And I remind them in every one of those conversations that yes, we're having to adapt to all these different external forces and making sure that we make the right connections so we're successful as an institution in the whole arena of higher education. But we're still at our core the same kind of institution that we remember when we were a student 30 years ago. You probably graduated 5 years ago. Joe, I don't know how old you are. So
a little older than
that. And I think we need to remind people of that, because there are some still fundamental things that will never change in higher education, around making sure that students critically evaluate information, have the ability to look at all sides of an issue. And we're not going to stop doing that. It may look a little different, but it's at its core, that's still there. And I think that's important for people to understand, because we get caught up in all the narrative, the social media stuff about the things that are happening on campuses, but we still are at core providing that fundamental education to our students.
You know, one thing that you say too, from a personal standpoint, is it makes us all more visible, the social media piece. So all your decisions as a college and university president and all those that I've talked to, there's just so much more. And not that there wasn't pressure before, but there's a lot more pressure that can come your way in social media. And there's never a decision that pleases everyone. And so many high-level leaders I've had on say the same thing. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like the decision that you make. That's why the job of a college and university president is so hard, because you're dealing with parents, and you're dealing with students, and you're dealing with the media, and you're dealing with the community and other CEOs. And there's just so many stakeholders that have to be managed. But Rick, it sounds like you're doing it pretty well, my friend, especially if the institution is growing. I want to thank you. Everything you said today was
fire.
That's my fire button. It was fire. I really appreciate your time. It's an honor to have you on this podcast. I hope you had a good time. Did you have a good time at least?
I did. I didn't know what to expect, but the way you've laid this out made it a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Well, that's good. That means we had a successful podcast today. Ladies and gentlemen, his name, my guest today, Dr. Rick Newman. He's a shocker, Wichita State University shocker, and he's the 15th president of Wichita State University. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. The purpose of education is to help learners discover their aptitudes and interests, develop their skills, and then deploy that knowledge to benefit themselves and others. The Charles Koch Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization, works with leaders in education to remove barriers that stand in the way of all learners reaching their potential. They support individualized and flexible models that improve access and quality for millions of Americans. They also support apprenticeship and upskilling programs that connect learners to in-demand jobs that match their skills and interests. The foundation is looking for new partners to challenge the status quo and transform the post-secondary education system. Learn more about their partnership opportunities and apply for a grant at ckf.org. You can also find them on Twitter at C. Koch Foundation and LinkedIn by searching Charles Koch Foundation.